Some villains crave power, others thirst for revenge, but every once in a while we'll come across a villain whose evil runs down to his very soul.
Like fire, hellfire.
What makes Judge Frollo so terrifying is that he neatly fits every category of human nastiness to ever exist. From our very first introduction of him right down to his downfall, one thing is blatantly plain. He is the devil incarnate. Esmeralda spat in his face, honestly justified. Today, I'll explore the reason why Judge Frollo earned the spite of the dancer, the church, every medieval Romani Parisian, the entire city of Paris, and even our very own selves. And no, it's not because he was a complete horn dog, although let's be fair, that was pretty cringe. There are actually 7 different reasons why Judge Frollo was such an abomination on mankind, and in this video, I'm going to prove each one. Before we begin, let's recap the film. The Hunchback of Notre Dame takes us back to medieval Paris, where the bells of Notre Dame ring over the city. The bell ringer, Quasimodo, isn't there by choice. He's an orphan because his mother was killed by a man on a black horse, and that man is the villain of our story. From the very first moment that we meet Claude Frollo, we can tell that he is pure, unadulterated evil. Not only is he wholly unperturbed by the fact that he just killed a woman, he's also prepared to yeet the child right down a bottomless well. If it weren't for the archdeacon of the church, Quasimodo would have never lived. But even the life of Quasimodo is a testament to how cruel Frollo really was. Because Frollo didn't keep Quasimodo out of respect for a member of the church, he didn't even keep Quasimodo because he was looking for a partner in crime. No, Frollo raised a gypsy son for another reason entirely. I'll get into that in a bit, but first let's take a look at his motives. They were a bit tricky to nail down, but I think I've managed to dissect them well. Like I said before, I don't think Frollo cared about power. Sure, he enjoyed his position in the government and it gave him a sense of superiority. But beneath all that, when you look closer, you'll see that he was really just a xenophobic freak. I mean, what exactly did he have against the gypsies? Seriously, dude, who hurt you? So it doesn't really make sense why he had such a vicious vendetta against the Romani people. Except, well, this. See, Judge Frollo spent his whole life being holier than thou. I believe he thought that by adhering to the standard way of life, he could be better than the people who were different. But there was a reason for that. I think he wanted to be one of the gypsies. Somewhere deep down in his twisted heart, he wished that he could be talented too. There's a hint to that in his character design, but it'll make more sense when I tell you when we get there. Instead of leading a life of passion, he was condemned to, well, being a normie. And that was something he was not okay with. The gypsies in all of their colorful glory represented everything that Frollo was himself not. The Romani people lived with spunk, dance, music, festivities, magic. In other words, their lives were full, whereas Frollo's was empty. My opinion, when their joy reflected his own misery back at him, he began to begrudge them in their uniqueness. This spark of jealousy grew into loathing. Thus began the commitment to giving them trouble. He wanted to squish the gypsies because he wanted to get rid of a mirror that he didn't want to look into. But it wasn't just about eradication either. It was also about control. But you'll get what I'm saying when I explain reason number 1. Before getting there, I'd like to bring up something about loathing. It doesn't quite, well, get rid of lust. Reason number 7, his obsession with Esmeralda. When normal people develop a crush on someone, they usually act shy and awkward or send that person a scented rose. Frollo, he damn near burned down a city. To begin with, it made absolutely no sense why someone who claimed to be so holy would lean in and sniff a woman's hair, especially a woman he claimed to hate. But that's just the thing. Frollo thought that he could do whatever he liked. I mean, obviously, that was going to turn him on. So he went down to his fireplace and started singing out his deranged lust.
Protect me, Maria. Don't let the siren cast her spell.
I mean, Esmeralda is clearly an attractive woman, but hunting her in every house in town, I think that's stretching it a bit far, don't you think? The thing is, if this man was trying to find and kill Esmeralda because he was furious that she stood up to him, that would at least make sense. Vengeance is a common motive for bad guys. This one, he was just plain creepy.
Choose me or the fire.
Ugh, gives me the heebie-jeebies. There's another bit about how Esmeralda publicly defying him definitely added fuel to fire. Pun intended, the city was burning, by the way. But it makes more sense when you understand his mindset. Now let's take a look at what he did to poor old Quasimodo. Reason number 6, his treatment towards the bell ringer. To begin with, Quasimodo wasn't supposed to be the boy's name. It was a name that Frollo gave to him with the intent to humiliate.
And Frollo gave the child a cruel name, a name that means half-formed, Quasimodo.
Throughout the film, we watch Frollo tower over Quasi. The boy calls him master.
Yes, master. I would like that very much.
And clamors and bumbles around the dude. But Frollo, he continuously berates Quasi and makes him feel as though nobody would ever like him. He condemns him to a life of loneliness and then makes fun of him for talking to inanimate objects. He denies him the very concept of fun. And when Quasi ends up in that mess at the fair, Frollo decides to punish him for longer. At this point, we were all like, dude, why are you like this? But there was a point later on where even Phobos, the gold-claden captain, echoed exactly what we were thinking.
Such a pity. You threw away a promising career.
Yeah, he did, but for good reason. Reason number 5, massacring the innocent. Frollo didn't just almost kill a baby, he also locked up an innocent family. Then he ordered Phobos to set their home on fire. It wasn't even as though he told the family that he was about to commit murder and arson. No, to them, he said,
This, if what you say is true and you're innocent, then you have nothing to fear.
And then he went ahead and did it himself. That's just inconceivably cruel. It made us wonder if he thought there was a god, but interestingly, that bit ties into his downfall, the very flaw that will undo him. Let's first take a look at another reason why Frollo is as hateful as he is. Reason number 4, his blind aversion to self-reflection. Typically, when villains feel no remorse, it's because they're trying to achieve something big. Take Lord Shen, for example. He was trying to burn down a country in an effort to reinvent the art of war. Frollo, he just wanted to get the girl. Maybe we would have been understanding towards the fact that he had a crush on Esmeralda, but he thought she was inviting him to sin. Deep down, this speaks to his psychology, but more on that shortly. It's just that. Even as he set fire to the peasant's home, he didn't for a second feel like it was wrong. He thought he was blameless in everything.
My conscience is clear.
And that brings me to the third reason why he was so vile. Reason number 3, hypocrisy in a robe. Using religion to abuse power is actually an ancient Roman method. Claude Frollo used it in the worst possible way. We first saw that happening with Quasimodo. Frollo has apparently taught him the alphabet in an ascetic religious context, but then we watch it happen at the fair too. Esmeralda is a gypsy. Of course she's going to have tricks up her sleeve. But when she refuses to get arrested, Frollo accuses her of witchcraft. Later, he tries to burn her at the stake and tells the whole town.
The gypsy Esmeralda has refused to recant.
It's not because he cares about some quote-unquote deliverance, it's because Esmeralda doesn't like him back. But it makes us wonder, why exactly does he behave like this? Reason number 2, he uses people as pawns. It was pretty clear from the start of the film that Frollo had no respect for human lives. He didn't care much for their dignity either. But at the end of the film, this got even worse. It's one thing to face another in combat, but it's another to kick someone while they're down. Frollo was about to kill Quasi while the hunchback was bent over weeping. He didn't really care that Quasi was in misery. No, as far as Frollo was concerned, Quasi had already served his purpose when he led Frollo to the Court of Miracles. And so there was no point in keeping him around. But what about this self-centered god complex? Reason number 1, his overt narcissism. Being a judge, Frollo naturally gets to have a lot of authority. But he continues to try to exercise it over absolutely everyone. His feud with the gypsies, it's about control. They represent freedom. That's something he can't stand. His desire for Esmeralda, also control. He wants to be with her whether she likes it or not. His treatment of Quasimodo, it all boils down to control. He wants to reign over every aspect of Quasi's life. Even him decreeing the death penalty on Phobos was actually about him establishing himself. But why? Why does he want to lord over everything? Well, in short, because he's an overt narcissist. We see this throughout the film. Judge Frollo first tries to kill Quasimodo because he thinks the child's face is hideous. Then, when we watch him having raised him, we see that Quasi is hunched over. But then you're like, wait a second, isn't Quasi also spectacularly strong? Incredibly acrobatic? When I watched this film as a kid, I thought that Quasi probably had some sort of illness that caused him to have a hunched over back. As an adult, I realized that it's the impact of abuse. A narcissist always makes sure that everyone in their surroundings shrinks. This feeds their ego. But their most significant target? Good-natured, kind-hearted people with a pure soul. That's exactly what Quasi was, an empath. So much of an empath, in fact, that he understood the relationship between Esmeralda and Phobos, put his own feelings aside and put their hands together. Empaths naturally have a strong conscience and try their best to please other people. This makes them a perfect feasting ground for people like Judge Claude Frollo. Like I mentioned before, people like Claude Frollo feel that they are never to blame. Instead, they make others feel shame and guilt in order to destroy their self-confidence. That's why we saw Frollo say sorry all the time. Frollo kept Quasi isolated and told him that he was unworthy of love.
I am your only friend.
It's a hallmark of narcissistic traits. The reason he didn't want Quasi going out there was because he knew that people could learn to look beyond his appearance and admire him for the person that he was. But that absolutely could not happen because it would strip Frollo of his power. He wanted to keep the power because it exaggerated his sense of self. That's exactly why he was so furious at Esmeralda for her public display of defiance. It didn't just weaken his stance with Quasimodo, it shook his public image. Narcissists, they can never stand that. So he established damage control there and then continued to manipulate Quasi into believing that the outside world was cruel when it was, in fact, he who was the monster. We also watched Frollo manipulate Quasi into heading off to the Court of Miracles. Of course, Quasi probably wouldn't have done that if Sonny or Phobos hadn't had been there, but in the end, Quasi ended up serving Frollo in a way he hadn't intended to. Frollo was a pretentious demon who cared about one thing and one thing only, himself. But Disney made that pretty clear from his very design. That is why in our first introduction of him, before he even spoke, we knew this guy was bad news. Everything about Frollo screams creepy evil dude. He has a pointed chin and a sharp nose, which suggests his manipulative and cunning nature. The black robes with hints of purple and red, that's a signature Disney color palette for overt, outright, up-in-your-face evil, but it's also suggestive of mystery. Secondly, we can see that red ribbon dangling from the back of his hat. It spells out danger, and more than we could think was possible. But could there be another aspect to this? In my opinion, the red symbolized the passion and frivolity that he begrudged the gypsies. Then there's the black horse that he loves. When Phobos gallops away on it, we hear Frollo yell,
Get him, and don't hit my horse.
This is not out of love for the animal, but rather the protection of his belongings. In medieval times, black horses were uncommon. Frollo likely paid a lot of money to acquire this. Frollo carries himself with the airs of someone who is distinguished and elite. Considering his position and authority, that actually makes sense. But then you see that his personal sense of royalty is actually an insane delusion of grandeur. And that is exactly what killed him. Frollo didn't meet his end by being carried off by gypsies into the night. He didn't even meet his death when Quasi finally stood up to him. No, Frollo died because he tried to be the Scar to Quasimodo's Mufasa. After he wages war on the church, no surprise there to be honest, we all knew that he didn't really care about God. He tries to balance himself on a ledge as he attempts to strike down Quasimodo, and hopefully with him the gypsy as well. But as he recites a Bible verse, God finally says, enough. It's as though the universe is like, sit down, Claude.
And he shall smite the wicked and plunge them into the fiery pit.
Indeed, and that gave him a literal downfall. Poetic justice served piping hot. Pun intended, he got roasted literally. God judged the judge, and the scales of balance did not tip in his favor. And honestly, after all that brutality, this was well deserved. So why is Judge Frollo Disney's most vile villain? Because he blends every shade of evil, bigotry, hypocrisy, lust, abuse, arrogance, and wraps it all in sanctimony. He's not just bad, he's terrifyingly believable. Next time someone says Disney villains aren't scary, remind them of the judge who tried to purge Paris in the name of righteousness and burned for it.